Hello, and welcome to the Bold Leadership Story Show, where we talk about experiences shaping exceptional lives. And today I'm honored and blessed to have a guest that I'm just thrilled to have a conversation with, is Catherine Schiffer. And she is an author, she's a speaker, she's an athlete, and just a beautiful lady. And I'm really excited again to have her with us on the show today. And I'd like to welcome you to the show, Catherine. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Jim. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So let me introduce you properly here. Uh, Catherine's a sought after speaker, a published author, an accomplished athlete and business owner who takes her experiences of past trauma and living victoriously to audiences both in person and virtually. Keynoting women's conferences, addiction ministries, and leadership events, she speaks on topics like finally breaking free, overcoming childhood trauma, the priority of forgiveness, and turning your mess into a message. Wow. She says, refuse to inherit dysfunction by learning a new way of living instead of repeating what you've lived through. Wow. That's easy to say, but much,
Right.
much harder to actually do. And you have done it. So that's what our story, I think, is going to be about today, is how you've accomplished that.
Okay.
The trauma of childhood sexual abuse plunged Catherine into drug and alcohol abuse as a teen and well into her 30s. Now, at 51, she's actively involved in Alcoholics Anonymous and Celebrate Recovery. She owns a nonprofit whose mission is bringing awareness to childhood sexual abuse. When she's not speaking, coaching, listing a house, or working out, she's spending time with her best friend and husband, Adam, or one of her 6 kids or 7 grandkids. Wow, what a blessing and legacy you've built.
So I have to, the speaker sheet I'm just seeing needs to be updated. It's hasn't been a while since it's been read. I'll actually be 56 tomorrow.
Ah, wow.
And
Very
now I
good.
have 8 grandkids.
Yeah, we need to update that, huh?
I need to update that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to start us off with a bang here.
Okay.
Our audience doesn't know you yet, but I think after this question, they'll start getting a really good idea. If you're ready?
I'm ready.
All right. With all you've been through, if you were able to go back to your 5-year-old self and have a conversation, what would that look like to you?
That is such a great question. And it's actually a question I've been pondering this last year in my life. Like would I do it all over? And to be able to have what I have now. And if I were able to go back to her and tell her something, it would be that it's all going, there's a plan. There's a plan and there is a purpose. Stay strong. Do not run to drugs and alcohol. Run to the arms of Jesus. And just get ready, because God's got a plan in this that is going to blow your socks off. And just hold tight to our Savior.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
And how do you think she would respond?
She would probably say, why me? I know that's what I've said for a long time. Why me? And, the answer that I've gotten over the decades that the Holy Spirit has spoken to me is, it seems harsh and it seems cruel, but, there's so much pain in this world. Why not me? Why not? And, it's hard to say that, but I think that, the problem is that we all live in a broken world filled with sin. And the enemy wants to destroy children at the core. If he can take a child out, if he can molest their minds, their body, their spirit, their soul, their emotions, he can pretty much have free reign with them for the rest of their life. So I think she would say, why me? And I would just tell her, because you got a big mouth, girly, and you're going to use it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So explain to me a bit
Okay.
what you were feeling and during those days when you know, you had childhood trauma,
Mm.
you had sexual abuse, um, and done some research on that. It's so prevalent, even in our own backyards. We
Yes.
don't even realize
Yes.
what we're what people are experiencing and doing in our neighborhoods and in our kids in our schools,
Mhm.
and that what kids are um, living through. Um, how did that feel to you at that time?
So I'll just share a little story about, how it all started. So, I was 3. And actually, in the book, it's really the me waking up to life. My
Mhm.
first real memory is being carried out of my bedroom at 3 and sexually assaulted on the couch, by my stepdad. And so I think for a long time, I thought it was normal because it was just what I remember happening. I remember being very afraid as a child. I remember
Mhm.
feeling very unsafe. And I remember feeling different. I just always felt different than everyone else. But I think, until probably I was 7, is when I began to really feel like something in my home was different than what was in other people's homes.
Mhm.
The problem, the molestation by my stepdad, was just one piece, because I also had a mother who has a severe, who has a mental illness that has I'd have never looked at her doctor's records, okay? I've never seen
Right.
that. But I would, based on the history, me researching for the book, even the history of my family, I would say that, and the things I've seen her do, and the things I've heard her say in the, 10, 15 years ago, that there's definitely an issue with mental illness there. So I had a mom who was, she had me when she was 15 in 1968, and a very strict religious upbringing by my father, who was a stoner and a druggie. And
Mhm.
so there was a lot of issues there. And when I first was born, I was taken immediately to foster care. Like, I did not sit in my mother's arms and get and bond. I went to a foster mother.
That's so traumatic. We don't. There's memory there.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, but I have none. But I will tell you that, as I think that's what saved me, a piece of what saved me, because I had nurturing and love in the first 6 months of my life.
Okay.
So that was a really a big part of, I think, how I was able to break free. Not only that, but the other, I call them my angels in my book, which was
Mhm.
my grandparents and my nannies and my aunts, the people who really were able to nurture and show me love. So that was so I had a mother who had this, all her own issues, and covered them with alcohol.
Well, she
And
was a kid. She was 15, right?
she was a kid. She
I
didn't know what
can't
she was.
imagine being 15 and having it's like, no.
No, and my dad was not nice to her. And then she had another child 13 months later. And then, they got into the world of drugs and alcohol. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, she was violent. She was
Okay.
violent. She was mentally abusive, emotionally abusive, and they both were spiritually abusive. So that was my whole environment as a child growing up, is
Mm.
this complete and utter breakdown of the family unit and utter dysfunction. So I think that, me feeling how I felt back then, it changed so many times. But by the time I was 7 and I would go visit a friend's house, I started to notice that, like, there's something wrong in my home, and then the secrets, the hiding, the don't tell
Mm.
anybody. What stays in our home, what happens in our home stays in our home. And then the other piece of it, when you're being groomed by a pedophile, they they make you a part of the problem. And what I mean by that is they say, well, if you didn't walk around in those PJs, or if you didn't look like that, or if you didn't do this, or if you, so they kind of make it and at some point about you, like, okay, now I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah,
So
it's your fault.
so there's
When you
ton.
say grooming, explain that. Help me understand what that means.
So the first thing a predator does to sexually assault a child, number one, is they look for a family unit that's broken. And he saw that with my mom. My dad was in prison for selling drugs to an undercover cop. So my mother was alone. She had two little girls. She met him. She was 19 and he was 45. Red flag right there, right? But then he saw this sickness within her, and he began to infiltrate into her life. And then he began to treat us. I don't remember this, but I know like he would buy us. I mean, I remember this piece. I don't remember two. So I met him. He came into our life when I was about 2.5, 3 years old.
Okay.
And so, and from there on, he was kind of my protector, right? He would protect me from her. Like, you're mine. I'm going to protect you. I'll give you candy because she won't. I will. So, and he just begins to make you think that he's on your side. He's, I'm a buddy and you can trust me. And that's how a predator steps in, and they begin grooming this child for what's coming next. And that is the sexual act. So and that's always the way it starts.
That's devastating. And you had a sister too, right? At that time?
Yep. Uh-huh.
And you in your story, you talk about her briefly from what I saw, but I'm assuming she had the same
so
kind of experience.
Story, of course, yes, absolutely. And when I started this book, my agenda was to make it. I didn't want to bring anyone else into it. I didn't want to tell her story because that's her story to tell. I didn't want to tell anyone else's story because I'm not the only person in my family that he sexually abused. I have aunts too, but that's their story to tell. So when it comes to my sister, I just, I mentioned that she's there, and yes, we both had the same experience. But then if she wants to tell her story, then that's her story to tell.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's good. And when you became aware, how old were you when you actually became aware of your situation? That it wasn't normal.
About 7 or 8. So when my mother fell in love with this man, and he, after researching for the book, come to find out that he was actually they were in Monrovia, and she worked at a little restaurant, and he was across the street at the brokerage. He was a broker. And that's how they met. Well, he was moving to Louisiana, and I didn't know any of the reasons why, but after researching for the book, I found out that he was being run out of California because he had molested his own 2 daughters. And the ultimatum by his wife at that time was leave the state or go to jail. So he left the state, and he took my mother with him and left my sister and I in the care of our aunt. And then when my dad got out of jail, we went to live with my father. And we'd fly back and forth to Louisiana between 5 and 7. And then and always it would happen. We'd fly out there. He would abuse us, and we'd come home. I told everybody too. Like I said, I got a big mouth. I told my nanny. I told my grandma. I told my mom. I told anybody that would listen.
So you were telling them what?
That he was touching me in my private places, that he was, putting his privates on my privates. And my grandma believed me, and she protected me, and I went to live with her, but she died when I was 5. So once she died, that's when I went to live with my dad. And then Dad was, a drug addict. He was strung out on pills and alcohol and marijuana. And so he really didn't have the fortitude to do anything, or, it was just an addict is selfish at the core.
Hmm.
So he would fly us back out there, and I would come back, and and I would tell, and I told my mom, and my mom's response when I was 5 was, stop telling horrible lies about him.
Mm.
And so and she said, she called me a liar. She said, stop telling lies. And she said, I want you to go back and tell everybody that you told that to that you were lying. And if you pick up my book, you'll see how that devastated me, because I was in the care of, I had a nanny in my life who taught me about Jesus. And, lying was against, Jesus didn't want us to lie. So when I had to go to her and tell her I was lying, I think that's when the shame started setting in, because
Mm.
it was horrible. And I always felt like my whole life, like no one believed me. And it didn't even matter. I could tell. I told cops, I told CPS workers, I told neighbors, I told everybody, and no one did anything. And I felt unbelieved, and I felt invisible my whole life, and it didn't even matter. So why utter a word?
Wow. What were the do you think that's common today?
So I think as we've gotten into where we're at, a lot of things have changed. But my husband, he's an investigator for the public defender's office, and he handles all the sex cases and murders.
Mm.
And he will, I mean, more often than not, and it's ironic, but he handles all the people the molesters,
Right.
and more often than not, the family is standing for the pedophile and against the victim. And I think, number one, it's because of they choose that's who they've chosen. They've chosen someone who's broken, right? And someone who needs them. My mother needed him financially in every way.
Mhm.
So if she were to believe these things, you remember she was told. So, oh, I don't know if I told you this, before she left to go to Louisiana with him, his ex-wife came to her and told her, this is he's being run out because he molested his own daughters, and you have 2 little girls. You might want to reconsider. She was being
Wow.
told right and left. But again, in her own brokenness, it behooved her to not believe them. And it's in their best interest not to believe them. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think they're even scared of the predator, you know?
Right.
But I think as we've moved in, the Me Too movement was huge, where, people are coming out. And now, so when I was 21, and I wanted to go and I wanted to file charges against them, both.
Mhm.
But back then in the 80s, the statute of limitations was 7 years. That was it.
So you had no way of doing anything legally.
Nope, I had no recourse. Statute of limitations had run out. Today, there's no statute of limitations.
What could a parent have done? If you mentioned that you told several people who should have been influential enough to do something. What could they have done?
I honestly will tell you that if a 3-year old, a 5-year old comes up to you and tells you that someone is doing sexual acts that a 3-year old and 5-year old and 7-year old should not know about, you
Hmm.
believe that child. Believe if I've done studies, and I've read studies where what impacted me the most was not the sexual act. What impacted me the most and had the most detriment on my brain was not being believed or protected by the by the parent, the natural parent. That is when that's when things really break in the child's brain. If I would have been protected, if I would have been believed, a lot of the things that I went through up to today would probably have been eliminated. But believe the child, take them to therapy, talk to, talk, turn them in. Let them go through court. Let the justice system decide. Let an investigation ensue, and
But
then
wouldn't that investigation bring, for example, if that were you, wouldn't you have had to go in and face these big people in court and do all that to prove
most.
the case and be against people who are taking care of you? I mean, couldn't that potentially be uh, you might think that you would be threatened by that
I would
idea.
imagine that I would have, and it would have been very hard. But what I've learned today is it usually is not, they don't take the children and put them on the stand.
Okay.
They, up until a certain age, they are interviewed by the judge, they're interviewed by the attorneys, and maybe they're even done a tele or like a video conference with them, and they're shown that way. They know not that could lead to even more trauma for the child if they're put on the stand. Because if I had to face him, and I never, so when up until 7, I told everybody what he was doing to me. After 7, I never said another word.
Yeah, because nobody's listening.
When I was listening, number 1, and the shame set in because I thought I was the problem. I
Thought
was
it was you.
wrong. I was going to go to jail. He took, and if I said something, it was going to destroy the whole family. And if I said something, that him and I would both go to jail because I was just as wrong as he was for doing this. So the shame had set in by then. But I also, fast forward to 12, 13, and 14, I was calling, my mother was physically abusive to a point where, it was just, she cut off all my hair. She hit me in the head with frying pans. She, beat me in the front yard in front of the neighbors, called me all kinds of horrible names, made fun of my breasts, made fun of my teeth, made fun of the way I stood, made fun of everything about the way I looked, and all these things that she did to me. I became a chronic runaway at 12, and I would run away. And actually, I'd roam the streets at night with my little suitcase. I always eventually come back home, but I would tell my little girlfriends that my mom was doing these things to me, and I think back then, gosh, there was just so much, spare the rod and spoil the child, and corporal punishment was very much a part of most children's life, right?
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go get me something to beat you with.
Yeah. So it was really hard to explain to people exactly the extent of what was happening. But there was one evening in particular where my mother, I had started wearing her clothes. So my mother worked nights and she slept during the day. And so she would, I would get up in the morning. I would pull her dirty clothes. I thought my mom was beautiful. I loved the way she smelled. I loved her hands. I wanted to be just like her. And I wanted her to just love me. So I did I was academically sound. I did everything. I was obedient as possible. But by the time I started getting older and recognizing boys, I wanted to be pretty. And that my mother's beautiful, by the way. And I thought that's the reason no one believed me, because when I would turn her in or go talk to a police officer or something, they'd come to the house, they'd talk to her, she'd be all dolled up, and she would say, oh, she's just an incorrigible child. And then they would walk away. And I thought because she was pretty, that she had all this influence. So my goal at a very young age was to be pretty, no matter the cost, because I thought that's what was going to take me where I needed to be. But there was, and I will just emphasize this before I go on to the next story. My stepdad was a deacon in the church. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. He was a deacon in the church. He got up every single morning. He sat with his Bible and his coffee. He read, he studied, he went to work, came home with a bottle of Jack Daniels, drank it, and then molested me. So and then they would make us read the Bible. They would make us memorize scripture. My whole life, I was told that I was going to hell and they were going to heaven, and that I couldn't hold on to her tail, that when the rapture happened and she started floating into the sky, I was not going to be able to grab onto her skirt and go with her. I was going to be left behind. And so the spiritual abuse that happened in my home impacted it even more. So that, and just a little side note, me and my sister, we would get up on Sunday mornings, a little bus would come around and we would jump on the bus to go to church every Sunday morning and then we'd get home before they woke up from their drinking night, and we'd walk in the house and they'd still be sleeping and we had gone to church. So I had this thing about God, but it was so broken and it was so distorted. And, but I just was searching for something. But there was one night in particular when she found out that I was wearing her clothes and wearing her Charlie perfume and wearing her makeup to school, that she,
And how old were you?
I was about 12.
Okay.
Okay. And that night, and this was two, so that, and it happened twice. The first time I was pulled out of my bed, I was beaten, I was berated, all my hair was cut off. She took all my clothes and put them in a pile in the backyard for a bonfire. Took away any makeup that I was allowed to use. She wanted me, she just wanted to destroy me. And then she gave me a dress that was 2 sizes too small and a pair of slippers. With my hair, she put a bowl on my head and cut my hair around the bowl. And then she said, I know you're going to run, but you're getting on that school bus looking like this and you're going to school. And then we're going to see how pretty you are. So she stood with me at the school bus. I got on the bus. And as I walked down the aisle, every head turned as I was walking down the school bus and I went to the very back. And that is when this hardness set in. And I know no one's ever going to mess with me again. And that's when the hardness came. I became rebellious and I was going to get out of here any way I could. And so one other evening, she had found out I was wearing her clothes. I was sneaking her makeup and she called the police. And she said, I want you to come pick up my daughter and take her to juvenile hall. And she put a few clothes in a brown paper bag. The police walked in the door and they said, well, what has she done? And she said that she's a liar and she's a thief and she's stealing from me and she needs to be punished. And they actually took me to Johnny Gray Jones youth shelter at the age of between 12 and 13. And they put me in this home. And I remember driving up, I lived in the backwoods of Louisiana, swamp and trees and woods. And I remember driving down this long, dark road and we came to this home that looked like an old time home with the front porch and just the weeping willow trees. And I was so scared. And I remember it was in the middle of the night and I walked in, they gave me my bed and my bunk, they put me down. And the next morning I woke up and I felt a sense of peace. I felt a sense of safety. I went down the stairs with the other girls. There was a hot breakfast on the table. There was people there talking to me. Are you okay? And I'm like, oh my God, I love it here. I never want to leave. And it was only a 3-day hold. And then they would take you to court and the judge would determine if you go to a juvenile hall or if you go back home. And my mom walks in with her pretty little heels and pretty little hair. And, she's a liar. She's incorrigible. She's out of control. And they sent me home. After that, I began running away and calling the police and saying, I'm a runaway. Come pick me up. And so they would come pick me up. They would take me to Johnny Gray Jones. I'd stay there for 3 days. And then the whole court thing would happen and they'd send me back home. Runaway. This happened 3 times until the final time. It was the 3rd day. Actually, I think I had to stay there 5 days because there was a weekend included. And the facility took all the girls to church that night. And it was a very charismatic, hands in the air church. And so I was sitting in the row with the girls and one of the girls whispered to me, she said, hey, she's going to run tonight. And I said, really?
Yeah, this is a great place. Where are you going?
So I told her, I said, I want to go with you because they were going to send me back home. As far as I knew, maybe something more would have happened. Maybe, I think back on it all, maybe I would have actually gone to court and said, he's raping me. And they would have done something. Maybe I would have actually said it, but I never said it.
Why didn't you say anything?
Because I was going to go to jail too. I thought that I was wrong, that I was allowing it. And let me just be very clear with people who are listening and maybe women who have had this happen to them. Our bodies are made to enjoy sex. Okay. And when you are coming of age and these things are happening to you, the body will respond even if the brain doesn't want it to. And there was this breakdown of, oh my God, what is happening? And I appalled him and he disgusted me, but my body was responding. So then, oh my God, Catherine, you are filthy. You're dirty. You're gross.
Mm,
There's something wrong with you. So that's why I never told, because I thought I'm definitely going to jail. This is bad.
mm,
So that night in that church, they said, I said to the girl, I said, I want to run with you. And she goes, okay, follow everything I do. And she started worshiping the Lord with her hands in the air and having this experience. And then at the end, they said, if anybody tonight wants to get saved, go in the back with this lady and talk to her. So the girl goes, get up. So I got up. I had no idea what was happening. So I got up. I followed them all back. We're going down the hall at the church. The lady goes left with several other girls, and she looks at me and she says, run. And we went the other way. We went down the corridor, out the front door, through the backwoods of Louisiana, running. And I had briars and wrought iron fences and chicken wire. I was torn. I mean, and that story is in the book. And that is the one story that I tell people that ever since I was 15 years old, they're like, you need to write a book.
right.
And
Oh,
that's
it was a great read. It's really a great read.
yeah.
So
Yeah. So that is how I actually got away from them.
did you
And
hear the bloodhounds in the background?
huh?
Did you
Yeah.
hear the bloodhounds in the background?
It
Sounds
was
like a movie
quite an
story.
experience. Yes. Yeah. But then I never went back. I made my way to California and I never went back.
Wow.
Yeah,
And you
that's
were
the second
15.
chapter.
How did you break free from that? And you today are living, yeah, I would never know
Yeah.
this story. And you've decided to share it for, I think, beautiful reasons.
Mhm.
And I know it's not easy for you to do. Why did you decide to share this and so publicly be open like this?
So that's another great question. Most of my life I hid. Once I got to California, I found marijuana and I found methamphetamine. I became a raging meth addict for 14 years. And I hid in the shadows of drug addiction. And I became everything that she said I would become. I was a failure. I was a loser. I was a liar. I was a thief. I was a cheater. I was everything she said I I became.
Mm,
And at 20, and then I married my drug dealer at 16, and I had a baby at 17. I have another one at 19, another one at 21. And again, in the throes of this addiction, which by the grace of God, I had enough strength and got enough to be able to come off the drugs while I was pregnant. Although you don't know you're pregnant for quite a while, right? So
mhm.
God protected my children in utero. They're amazing, amazing children. And I left that marriage, and because I was going to die, and I actually got saved when I was 19. So I went to a little church. My son. So my son was born, and he had THC in his system, and they were going to take him away from me. And I begged them, please don't take my son away. I'll do anything. And so I went to this little church, and back then it's like, if you want to get saved, you got to get up and walk to the front of the church.
Yeah, a little intimidating.
Right. But I did it, and I gave my life to the Lord, and everything began to change. Like, I didn't want that life anymore. But unfortunately, I was so deep in that lifestyle that, and married to your drug dealer, he was making it, right? He's a meth manufacturer. So
Wow.
I knew if I didn't get out, I would die. So I left with my 3 children, and I went and got on welfare, and I did my best to stay clean and sober. But unfortunately, the drug just followed me everywhere I went. And at that point, my children went to live with their father's mother, and I went and became a strung out drug addict and living in seedy hotels, doing what all meth addicts do. And when I was 29, I got arrested and I went to jail. And I remember waking up like on the third day. I'd already been high for like 4 or 5 days. And so I woke up in jail, and this woman comes up to me, this big, burly Aunt Jemima looking woman. And she's like,
Mhm.
First time in, honey? I'm like, yeah. She goes, it won't be your last. And I said, is that a thing? Like, what does that mean? And I went and I found a book by Stormy L. Martin in the library called The Power of Prayer. And I read that book. And it said, in everything, every circumstance of your life, be grateful. And I say, be grateful. Because remember, I got saved now 10 years earlier. And I said, grateful, God, grateful for all of the trauma, all of the beatings, for all of the rapes. And said, be grateful. And
by a man who is a deacon.
Yes, right.
How do you trust that after that?
It was very difficult. It was very difficult. I've worked, my life is an onion, and I've not, let me just be very clear with your audience. I have not arrived. I still have triggers. I believe it or not, I do not like being on the stage, although God has pushed me to the forefront. And my way to hide is through alcohol and drugs. And that was until I was 29. I was strung out on meth, and that stint in jail cleaned me up. And I never went back, by the way. And I think the reason that she said that to me is because everyone who goes to jail breaks their probation and ends up going back. Well, I never used drugs. I never used meth again, so I never broke my probation. So I never went back to jail. I also found out I was pregnant with my fourth child. I was in a new relationship, and I was 29, and I came out, and I said and they sent me to all these drug classes and all these different programs, and I got clean. And it's been almost 30 years since I've used meth. But so I'll tell you, take meth out of the equation, and your life goes up, right? I don't care what else.
Stuff.
So although I continue to drink, my life got a lot better. I started going to Emmanuel Faith Church down in Escondido, and I started going to Bible studies. And I'm just going to Bible study this out of me. I'm just going to do it. It's God's going to do it. And I continued to drink in my 30s. And then when I was 39, my first grandson was born. And I went to the doctor because I was a cigarette smoker for 27 years. And the doctor, and I was to get to the top of my stairs at 39, and I was out of breath. And so I went to the doctor, and he said, Catherine, if you don't stop smoking, you will be on oxygen by the time you're 55. So I said, okay, the only way I can quit smoking is if I quit drinking, because they're like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together for me. And so I quit drink. I went to Celebrate Recovery at one of the churches here in Wildemar. And I started going through recovery, and I found the steps, and I found, the fourth step changed my life, the fourth and the fifth. And, and you have to have an accountability partner in your life while you're going through the program. And in that fourth step, I have to write down everything that I had ever done to hurt anybody. And I didn't talk about that. Right. But I wrote it all out. And then the fifth step is you share it with a trusted partner. And I remember going to her house and getting ready to share this with her. And I just knew she was going to throw me out of her house. She was going to, she never want to look at me again once I told her all the things I had done. And the funny thing is she just nodded and smiled. That's what we do. That's what we do. And so my life shifted at 39. That's when it all changed. Just the program of Celebrate Recovery changed my life. Jesus Christ saved my life through that program.
Beautiful. It's still, even though those programs are there, I know takes a lot.
It does. It takes
of work and a lot of effort, a lot of fortitude, and creating new habits, reprogramming your brain. Yeah. It's a lot to do on your own, and those groups help a lot. But you still got to do a lot of work on your own, I would think.
A lot of work. And God was so graceful to me. He just one layer at a time, and I have heard women say, I just can't look at it. I can't go back there. It's going to kill me. That's not how our God works. He is so graceful, and he's so merciful. And he just peels one layer at a time, and I look at this, and then now we'll look at this, and then 10 years later we'll look at this, and 5 years later we'll look at this. And it's my not one day in recovery was as bad as my best day on the streets. So ladies, gentlemen, because one in 7 boys are being sexually abused by somebody they know, and 1 in 5 girls. And the problem is there's no longer stranger danger. It is uncle, grandpa, stepdad. It is someone. It's the neighbor. It's the babysitter. It's the friend. Don't teach your children stranger danger. Yes, teach your children stranger danger. Also, be very clear with them on what is inappropriate touch. I have a nonprofit called One Voice, One Mission, and we are committed to providing curriculum to parents that would teach their children how to tell, how to recognize grooming, and without scaring them. And that has been, I feel like if someone would have came to my school or talked to me when I was 7, 8 years old and told me that all this was inappropriate, I would have been, well, let me tell you then. This is what, if I would have known it wasn't my fault, I would have told. So it's not, we need to be teaching our children, safe touch in our homes, and also being aware of strangers. But, it's unfortunate that it's most likely being done by somebody they know, like, and trust.
That's amazing. Those statistics, 1 out of 5.
1 in 5 girls.
20%. That's huge.
It is so this is my goings in and out of asking, God, why, because that's what I've asked him so many times. And, and then the worst part is that now, why, okay, God, I had to suffer all this, but now I'm an addict and I can't even drink over it. Even have a cocktail, it's like, damn. But what I've realized is that the enemy of our soul, if he, like I think I said earlier in the program, if he can take us out at a very young age, it's very likely that we will end up staying out for the rest of our life. Majority of men and women who have my story are in prison, are on the streets, or they are in the same kind of dysfunction with their family. It's very few break out. And that is why I get to look back and I get to say, why me? And again, Catherine, because you're bold and you're courageous, and you're going to stand up for the voiceless. And I will stand up and I will speak truth. And I don't care how scared I am now. And I started the book when and then, I know we're coming up on our time, but the forgiveness piece is huge. And I didn't forgive my mother until I was 54. And walking around with that gut ache for 54 years will destroy you. So there's one, back in those days, I was always told by the Christians in the world, forgive and forget, forgive and forget, forgive and forget. Well, okay, I forgave, but I can't forget. So that means I must not have forgiven. If you forgive, then you forget. And they had it so wrong. So wrong. I will never forget this. It's forgive and use it. Forgive and give it. Forgive and let, we are Jesus's hands and feet. He walked on this earth for 32 years, and then he sent his Holy Spirit to live inside of us, to minister to people. If I didn't have this story, I couldn't minister to those 1 in 5 girls or 1 in 7 boys. So get better. Let go of the unforgiveness. And forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. I am not reconciled with my mother. I do not have a relationship with her. She is not allowed in my life because she's very sick. And I have forgiven her. And it took me 54 years to do it, because this was what I said out of my mouth. Every criminal wants a get out of jail free card. Every criminal wants a mental illness plea, and I'm not giving it to her. So I'm going to hold on to this anger, and I'm going to, I'm going to carry it around with me. And all it did was just keep me stuck, and I have to be in vulnerability and transparency. I am, yes, I quit drinking when I was 39, but I picked up marijuana when I was 44. My life, I am, I like to hide in drugs and alcohol. That is my addiction of choice.
Mm.
And so I battled marijuana addiction for several years, and then at 54, I thought I could drink again. So that is my thing. And I have to stay very, very close to the Lord. And I just don't want, what I don't want is anyone to look at me and think she's got it all together, because I don't have it all together. But I do serve a very good God who has it all together, and who says, and he told me this morning, he said, Catherine, keep your eyes on me like Peter did when he was walking on the water, and you won't sink. But the minute you take your eyes off me, you will. So I don't know how long that I will be back and forth with this addiction, this, compulsive addiction personality. Maybe it's something I'll battle for the rest of my life. I hope not, but I just want people to know, if you fall, you're never a failure until you don't get back up.
Mm.
Don't fall. I fall all the time. Just don't stay down. Get back up, brush yourself off, and go at it again, and go at it again, and go at it again. Because I'm going to be going at it again until the day he comes back, until the day I die. I'll be battling this part of me, which now I call the flesh.
Mm. Why is that?
Because we have a sin nature. We have a nature. I have a nature that battles against another nature. I have the Holy Spirit living inside of me, and they are at battle all the time. And my flesh wants what it wants now. And the Holy Spirit is all about delayed gratification. And I'm not about delayed gratification. So I battle the flesh. I battle Catherine's rebellious self-will. I have a rebellious spirit. I do. I'm very headstrong, and I can do this. I know if I can do that, I can do this, and I can do this, But the thing is that, drugs and alcohol, it really it keeps you stuck. It keeps you, it shuts your mouth, and it keeps you ashamed. So as I journey in my walk, that is where I fall the most often. But I can tell you today I'm sober.
Yay!
Yay! And I'm at war, and I get up every single morning, and I visually put on the armor of Jesus Christ every day before I step my feet out of bed. He's my hope, and he's my salvation, and he's my everything. He brought me through everything, and he put me in this place. I have an amazing life. I owned a business for 15 years. I built it. I was the CEO. I wrote a book. I have a nonprofit. I'm an award-winning bodybuilder. I'm a realtor. I have my 4 kids who should hate me, and they love me, and 8 grandkids who adore me, and a husband who thinks I hung the moon. So
That's beautiful.
yeah, I'm in the best place I could ever imagine being.
So where did the quote that you have here, refuse to inherit dysfunction by learning a new way of living instead of repeating what you lived through? How did you create that?
So we never stop doing anything. We start doing something new. When you take something out, you have to replace it with something, or you leave a void, and it just sucks back in the old. So we want to, yes, I don't want to be angry anymore, right? So I want to forgive my mom. Well, then you have to start taking steps. You have to get help. You have to talk to somebody. You have, reading books, taking classes, so you have to fill the void. It wasn't until I was 54 that I forgave my mother. And it happened and I started writing the book because 10 years ago, I tried to reconcile with my mom like I do about every 10 years. And she comes out all pretty in her high heels and like she's, all good. And then it just goes south, and just like awful things that she says to me. And she's like, you're a liar. My husband never touched you. He's a saint. He's in heaven with the angels, and maybe he's in heaven. I don't know. It's not my problem. But I said, you know what, lady? You want to call me a liar? I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to tell the whole bleeping world what you did to me. That's how I started the book. I was pissed off. And it took me 3 years to write it. It's not huge, but I healed during that book. You know, you have to revisit. You have to go back. You have to break it down. Our brains have been wallpapered with lies. And if you don't go back and look at it and tear it down and replace it with the truth, which my truth is the word of God, then you're going to have a void in your life. You can't take something away without replacing it. And then I came across a book, you know, and it was by, oh my goodness, I'm going blank right now. It was a book on prayer, Fervent Prayer by Priscilla Schreier.
Okay.
And I read that book at 51 in a women's Bible study. And I remember sitting at the table with the women, and I'm telling them my story, and they're like, have you forgiven your mother? I'm like, yes, I've forgiven her. They're like, no, you haven't. And so I was reading this book, and Priscilla said, she said, and I was almost done with my book, and I had the title Pieces of Me, but in my mind, and God gave me the title, I'm like, pieces of who? Like, I'm not Oprah or anyone special. But in the book, it's Priscilla said, not only are we to forgive, but we are to have compassion. And I'm like, oh, hell no. How am I going to have compassion? I can't even forgive. So I'm towards the end of the book. I'd already gone through 3 years of healing, writing, laying it down for 6 months, looking at it, laying it down. And I'm at the end of the book. And I remember I'm in the gym, and that's where I get all my downloads, is in the gym. And God speaks to me clearly. And I'm working out, and I'm and I said, how am I supposed to have compassion, Lord? I can't even forgive. And people have told me this my whole life, and I never heard it. And the Lord said, baby, your mother is mentally ill. From the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, I felt a rush and a release. And I'm like, oh my God, she's mentally ill. That explains everything. And then I said, oh my God, I could be mentally ill. I could be so broken. I could be that woman on the corner. I could be all those things, but I'm not. And in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, I have compassion. And I gained compassion for her in that moment. And everything changed, and I was able to write the last chapter of the book, and I came up with the title, Pieces of Me, a Daughter of Mental Illness. I don't know what your journey is going to look like. I don't know what is going to be your book or your study or your group or your counselor. I don't know what it's going to be. Or it's going to be a combination of all of them put together. But it was that one book that I've read, and I've read hundreds of books, that hit me at the right time, the right place, and I surrendered and I gave it up. And today I'm free. I have no anger or animosity towards her at all. In fact, I have mercy and compassion. And I pray for her every morning. I pray for her her mind to be cleared and her spirit to be open. And she claims to be a Christian. And I hope that God will show her the truth. And I don't even know, maybe you can't face the truth at this point. She's 70 years old. You know, maybe that truth is too hard. I can't even imagine, you know, she has so many wonderful children and great grandchildren. And I just hope that before she stands before our maker, that she can stand before me and apologize, because it is going to take an apology. Yeah. So I know what I want, and we don't have to, you know, people say, but she's your mother. Like, she gave birth to me. She did. And I'm grateful for that, because at 15, she could have aborted me. And I'm grateful for that. But I don't consider her my mother. I have many, many mothers that have mothered me. And if she wants to be a part of my life, that's what I want. I want an apology. And I just want her to say, I know, and I believe you. and I'm sorry. And that's it. That's all she will ever have to say. And I will bring her in, and we can live the rest of our lives in peace. And I pray that happens someday.
Beautiful. So inspiring. It's with all the transgression that you suffered, to still continue to want to create peace.
Yes, I want peace. I want peace. I have a very peaceful life. Unless I'm struggling with something, I'm just, but, right now I'm more scared of me. I'm my own worst enemy. The enemy's a deceiver, and I sometimes believe his lies. And I want peace in my life, and I have peace in my life. I have a very peaceful life.
Very good. Well, it's because of your just your spirit. You're just like, your muscle is through. Wow, the time goes so quick.
Right? I know. I could talk to you forever.
Yeah, and I could listen forever. I'm really enjoying your story.
Yeah.
I have one more question, though.
Okay.
You got time?
Yeah.
I ask this of everybody on the show, and it's basically this: since this is a bold leadership story show, it's about leadership, and I see you as a bold leader. Absolutely.
Thank you.
What was the boldest leadership decision, taking your whole life into consideration? And we've covered a lot of ground in this last hour. What was the boldest leadership decision that you've made, and what were the consequences of that?
The boldest leadership decision that I've ever made was to stand up for myself and to speak truth and to be transparent and vulnerable. You know what? I could stand before you and say, I got it all together and I'm perfect. No one could relate to that. The best leadership thing I do is transparency and vulnerability and relate. And I can relate to you. I know. And that is what I do every single day. And I think that's the boldest thing I've ever done, is being honest about my brokenness and being transparent and being willing to change.
Yeah, beautiful. I see that step, being bold like that, and writing your book and speaking about your story. And it's very personal, it's very explicit, and it's very damning in many ways to certain people that you name, and it's real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so powerful, I think. And it needs to be shared.
Yeah.
Because of the stat
Yes.
that you mentioned, that I don't see it, but I know it's there in my neighborhood. The people that I see every day at the grocery store, or at Lowe's or at Winco or wherever I'm at, I look around and I see, 1 out of 5 of those kids is getting, the little girls is getting abused.
Think of a classroom full of 30 kids. What that means, 5?
5 of them, yeah.
5 are being abused at home. Yeah. Teachers, yeah.
And here in this town, in
this town,
right here in Temecula,
in your neighborhood, in your church.
Yeah. So it's very poignant for today, very topical, very now, very urgent, I think, is for us to wake it up to that and see it. So how would you see that? And what would you do about it?
So, you know what I do? I can't change the world.
Right.
I can have an impact on each person I meet. What I tend to do, and it might sound silly to people, but I pray when I see little kids. I'm like, Lord,
not silly.
I'll be through the grocery store and I'll see this beautiful bouncing curly head girl. And I'm like, Lord, please protect that child through her life. Please protect that little boy, and that's really all I can do, unless someone comes to me and wants to be open and transparent with me. But I think honestly, right now, we just need to be praying for our country, praying for our families, praying for our neighbors, praying for our schools. There's power in that. Some people laugh at it, but there's power, so much power in it.
Yeah, I agree. and it's not trivial. It's definitely powerful. Yes. So, well, thank you so much, Catherine, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Me too.
Okay.
Hang on a sec. I'm going to end your screen. Don't leave.
Okay.